Welcome to the Chatterbox Podcast. My name is Kyle McClellan, your host, and today we are coming to you from remote. We are doing a video interview with former Cardinal Scott Spiezio, and he has got such a dynamic story of his baseball career and then post-baseball career, what he's been going through the last 12, 15 years. I got to know Scott over through Cardinals Fantasy Camp and got to know his story. And it's just been remarkable on how outspoken he is and how willing he is to want to help people that have been in his same situation. So if you haven't heard of Scott's story and what he's been through, it is absolutely amazing. And I am thrilled to welcome Scott Spiezio to the Chatterbox Podcast. Scott, thanks for stepping into the Chatterbox. And I'm excited to talk about all things baseball, what you've been doing and going through the last 10 and 12 years that you've been very outspoken about. And appreciate you coming on to the show here so that we can have a discussion about it and kind of catch people up, Cardinals fans, on what you've been up to.
Hey, Kyle, thanks for having me. I look forward to talking. You know, I love sharing my story, you know, and it's mostly because I want to help people and give them hope. So Hopefully we can do that today.
Yeah, and that's been the thing I've been most impressed about, you know, knowing you for a couple of years. You probably don't know it, but we were actually very quickly teammates. In 2008 was my first Major League spring training. I think you were in camp for a day, and then you were not in camp anymore after that. And so we crossed paths very, very quickly, but then reconnected through Cardinals Fantasy Camp. And you were a part of that a couple years ago. And we just hit it off and just, you know, love your story. Obviously, as a kid growing up in St. Louis, watching you, I was in the minor leagues at the time, but watching you be a part of that 06 team, knowing your history through Anaheim and your time over there. And then you came to my charity event last year, came in town just for that to help represent our organization and spend time with our guests there, which was great. And then back at Fantasy Camp. So it's great to, you know, we were never actually teammates, but that's what I love about the Cardinals alumni and those fantasy camps is I've gotten to connect with a different generation of Cardinal fans. And I think your story is so dynamic that I think, you know, it's just, I think a lot of people remember you here with the red, soul patch and everything there and your time with the Cardinals. But I think it's important for people to hear what you're doing now. So let's jump in. I want to start. I don't think a lot of people probably know your connection to the Cardinals when you were a kid. You live close by. Your dad had a unique connection to the Cardinals. Why don't you talk a little bit about that first?
Yeah. So, and thank you for that intro. I really appreciate it. And I love what you do off the field with your charity and everything you do for the Cardinals and the community. So kudos to you for that. That's awesome. And about 2008, I was there for a little bit longer than a day. And I was hoping to stay, but it didn't happen. Freeze told me too. He's like, you know, we used to take ground balls together in spring training. I'm like, we did? He's like, yeah, you and Gloss. And so it's cool to reconnect. The Cardinals do such a great job with their alumni. And no matter if you played for a day, a year, or 20 years for them, they treat you the same. And that's a really cool thing for an organization to do. And that goes all the way back to my childhood. My dad, Ed Spiezio, played with the Cardinals from 1964 through 1968. Pretty good time to be playing for the Cardinals. He actually was drafted. Well, there was no draft. He was a free agent signee in 1963. By 1964, July, I think they called him up, and he finished the season with them in July. That year, he was like 4 for 12, so he didn't get too many at bats. They had too good of a team, but he was on the Cardinals roster and in the dugout for the World Series against the Yankees. And I just couldn't imagine, being in baseball, professional baseball for a year, and then facing you're on one of the greatest teams of all time, and then you're facing another one of the greatest teams of all time in the World Series, and so. They, of course, won it in 64, 67, and then 68. They ended up losing. And I heard a lot about, Kurt, like Lou Brock not sliding at home plate in Game 5, and then Kurt Flood slipping in Game 7. And then fast forward to 2006, we're playing Detroit, and Curtis Granderson slips. So another Kurt slips in center field, and the ball goes over his head and it hits his glove, goes over his head. Eckstein gets the hit and the RBIs, and we end up winning it. So it was all full circle. But when I was young, the Cardinals are so great about bringing back championship teams that it seemed like I was down there, every other year. And it was really cool for me. I just remember the excitement of coming into St. Louis, coming around the corner, because we're about 4 hours away, 3 hours and 45 minutes, something like that. And I remember coming around the corner and seeing the arch, and when we were still in Illinois, and just the excitement of it. And then, going to Busch Stadium and seeing guys like Lou Brock and Bob Gibson and Stan Musial and Bob Euchre and Tim McCarver, and just the list goes on and on. Orlando Cepeda, Bobby Tolan, and then of course the current team. So Ozzie Smith, Pendleton, all Tudor, all those guys. It was just such a treat for a kid to be able to do that. I do remember one of my favorite things was all the candy in the clubhouse. I was like, oh, look at all this pop and candy in the clubhouse. I love it. And so growing up, it was just incredible, having guys like, Bob Gibson and Lou Brock tell me about work ethic and saying, you're not competing against the guys from your hometown or even from Illinois. You're competing against the guys from Dominican Republic and Cuba and Puerto Rico and Venezuela and so on and so forth. And they said, it's easy to get to the big leagues. It's hard to stay there, because once you're there, everybody wants your job. And so you better outwork them. And that just stayed with me my whole life. And that's what every time I'd look on my headboard and see my goals, I'd say, what did I do today that got me closer to those goals? And I'd say, man, if I didn't do anything, I better work doubly hard tomorrow, because the kids down there are really working hard.
Yeah, no doubt. Did your dad ever have any stories about Gibby or Lou or any of those, Cardinal greats? I mean, he got to play with them for several years. I mean, surely there's some great stories about that generation.
Shoot. I mean, he'll say stuff all the time. Like, I'll say, hey, did this happen or something? There was a movie recently called After Jackie, which was about the 60s. And he told me a great story about the owner buying a hotel, because it was illegal for them to stay at the same hotel. And, Bob Gibson thought they were, joking about it. And he said when that happened, they all used to get together by the pool, and all the wives loved each other. And he said it just that's probably why they won. They came together as a team and as friends on and off the field. And he said it was like watching an all-star team. He didn't get to play that much over the course, but I was just flipping through some pictures, and I saw an article in Sports Illustrated about my dad in April of '65, and the article is Ed Spiezio, or won't you please pop up Ed Spiezio, and it was about my dad doing so well, and they wanted to send him down to AAA, but he was hitting 5-something in spring training, so they didn't send him down. So even though it probably would have been better for him developmentally wise, he got to watch one of the best teams ever put together, in that short amount of time. And so, yeah, he's got some good stories. He remembers. He talks a lot about like Cepeda and him, like going to jazz, finding jazz records in different towns. And he was talking about McCarver and I think Bryles were musicians and singers. And so a lot of them like music and stuff like that. And then the other thing, he's like, here I came up and all I knew how to play was third base. And who's at third base but Ken Boyer, the MVP of the National League. So that's one of the reasons I learned how to play every position except for catcher. And also he's like, you're not going to get platooned. I'm going to make you a switch hitter. So I think that kind of, influenced him, but also influenced, my future too.
Yeah, no doubt. So that story about the hotel is, I've heard it told. Ted Savage has told, and I've heard it from a couple different people, and it's a remarkable story
Yeah.
of when in spring training the team bus pulled up and the hotel came out and said the players of color cannot stay here; they have to stay somewhere else. And the owner, I believe it was Gussie Bush, said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "They can't stay here." And he told the team, he said, "Go to the field, I'll take care of it." And when they came back, he handed them their room keys. And they were like, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "I bought the hotel. You can stay here now." And I mean, it is just so remarkable to hear and to know, like, that wasn't that long ago, what those players went through in the 60s and what your dad witnessed those players go through. Ted Savage, who unfortunately, just recently passed away, had just some incredible, incredible stories about that generation and what, Gibby and Lou and all of those players had to go through, which is mind blowing. I mean, we know how hard it is to play at the big league level, and imagine trying to deal with those other things that go with it. Makes you have even so much more respect for that group and what they were going through and the stage they were setting for those to come after them to have an easier path is remarkable. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's an incredible story. So let's transition into your time. You obviously, having a dad that played in the big leagues is nice. Like you said, he kind of prepared you by being a switch hitter and kind of prepared you for some of those things. So early in your career, I mean, obviously, you made your name for yourself in the World Series in Anaheim. Kind of fast forward through your career a little bit until you get to that point where you're on the big stage and came through in the biggest moment.
Yeah, so real quick, I played at University of Illinois for 3 years.
I'm a Mizzou guy, man. I don't like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I still got the home run record at University of Illinois, and hopefully with the BB core bats now, nobody will touch it. So I signed in the 6th round with the Oakland A's in 1993. Was in the minor leagues for about three plus years, and then up to the big leagues. Playing with the McGuire and Giambi and Canseco and Ricky Henderson and Terry Steinbach. So it was quite a eye-opening experience to say the least when I got to the big leagues, and played there. The whole Moneyball thing. They didn't want to pay me when I hit arbitration. I was a Super 2 guy, barely. I became a free agent, and there was 3 teams basically came down to the Henshin Tigers, the Chicago Cubs, which is only an hour from me, or the Anaheim Angels. And it's weird because I didn't know which one to pick. And then I said, I want to stay in the United States. And then I went to get a drink of water, and there was an Angel Cup in there. And I'm like, where'd this Angel Cups come from? And I'm like, that's got to be a sign. So I ended up signing with the Angels. Good thing, because I ended up, pretty much playing. The first year I didn't play every day, but I played a lot and contributed quite a bit, and really fit in with a great bunch of guys there. And we ended up winning the World Series in 2002. And it was really cool because Joe Madden was our bench coach, and we had Mickey Hatcher and of course Mike Scioscia. Bud Black was our pitching coach. So Ron Renicky was our third base coach. 4 of those guys ended up being managers. And so we had a really great bunch of guys, great coaching staff. And, Scioscia just let us play, it was fantastic. And, the World Series, he said, I want everybody to bring their families and everything. I ended up having 48 tickets a game, which cost me a lot of money. Yeah. But I was bringing my high school coaches, my high school assistant coach, friends, everybody. My band, I had a band at the time, and so I had everybody. I had buses, I had flights up to San Francisco, hotel rooms, but it was worth it, to share with them. And you talk about the reason I had such a good career in the playoffs was because my dad, he made me work the mental game from the time I was probably 10, 11 years old, visualizing myself in those situations. And then at the end of every practice, we do the whole, hey, it's 3-2 count, 2 outs, bases loaded, down 1, bottom of 9, game 7 of the World Series. What are you going to do? And, I even have videotapes of that with my mom going, in the background, do it for the ring, Scott, and yeah. And so, during the playoffs, I felt like I didn't feel nervous at all. And I felt like I'd already been there a million times. And so when I think I had 16 RBIs going into game 6 and ended up hitting the 3-run homer. When the ball, it was a dramatic home run. It was very high and barely got out, but Reggie Sanders, another ex-Cardinal, hit the wall and it went over his head. And at that moment I heard the whole crowd and it was like, I had blocked all that out, and then I heard the crowd and I felt like I was 5 feet off the ground running around the bases, and like all these memories of me and my dad and mom and sisters in the backyard, came flooding back in. And then, of course, we won game 7, and then to have, them all in the clubhouse with me, and, my dad holding the World Series trophy with me, it was just one of those magical moments. And then fast forward, the next year I had a good year. I thought they were going to sign me to a long-term deal, but they had other plans. And so I ended up going to Seattle. In Seattle, so I signed a 3-year deal with Seattle. And 2 weeks ago in spring training, I ended up running into the mound on a pop fly in a freak accident. I blew out my thoracic T6 and T7 disc. And I tried to play, but then I remember I tried to hit a ground ball. I hit a ground ball and tried to run, and I just collapsed. And the doctors were all saying, you're probably not going to play again. If you try to play, you're not going to walk again. And then that's when I kind of, and I'm guessing we'll probably get into that later, but that's kind of when things started to go downhill a little bit, because now I wasn't playing, and I was trying to play hurt and things like that. And so I ended up, eventually finding a doctor that said, well, I think you can still play as long as you can put up with the pain, which is the wrong thing to say to me.
Right.
And so I tried to play. I ended up, I think I hit 215 with 10 home runs and 50 something RBIs, which in today's game would be, that get you about 20 million. But back then it wasn't too good. And so the next year, I ended up not playing that much. They brought in Richie Sexton and Adrian Beltre, 2 incredible players at my 2 main positions. And so I struggled through that year, only like, I want to say 40 something at bats at most. And then they released me, and I thought my career was over. And I was, I'd always prayed for 10 years in the big leagues. And I always say I should have prayed for 20, but I wasn't there yet. And then I was sitting upstairs in my place, and I heard this bang, bang, bang. It would have been February, I'm guessing 1st or 2nd week of February. It was pretty close to spring training starts, and I hadn't gotten any calls. And I hear a bang on my windows, and I look out, and there's a Cardinal keeps running into my window. He's just banging. Like, I'd come downstairs, he'd bang in the downstairs window. I'm like, that is weird. And then, I don't know, maybe an hour later, my agent calls and says the Cardinals, first I had the Angel Cup. Now right. I got the Cardinal banging on my window. And he said, the Cardinals want to invite you down to spring training. And I'm like, no way. And so I just got this huge burst of excitement and energy. And I was kind of down before that. And the first thing I did was go get my hair cut and dye my soul patch red. And then I told my agent, and he's like, oh, don't do that. St. Louis is conservative. And I said, no, trust me. It's my war paint. I'm going to do it every day, and they'll love it. And sure enough, they loved it. And I think it's some excitement to the team. I got down to spring training, and I thought I'd be like, number 89 or something. And I look at my locker, and it's number 26, which was my dad's number. And I about lost it. And I'm like, man, 2006, New Bush is opening. I got 26. We're winning this thing. And, I worked really hard that year. and had a really good year and felt like I contributed at many different positions and stuff. And it was just an incredible year. And then we win it. Just everybody on the team contributed. We had guys stepping up, Wainwright, Kenny. I mean, just so many guys out of nowhere just stepping up and being huge for us. And it was just a magical season. And then 2007, opening day was incredible because, with things, I ended up getting divorced and stuff, and with the stuff back in Seattle, and my dad and I didn't talk as much as we should, and he kind of, they're like, hey man, you're making bad decisions. If you're going to keep making bad decisions, we can't watch you do it, and so he kind of put his foot down, and the Cardinals called him up. I didn't know it, and invited him to come give me the ring. And so I was about ready to come out of the dugout, and they're like, and we got a guest presenter for the next ring, and for the first time in Major League history, a father-son. And I turn around, and my dad's right behind me with his old 26 jersey on, and I start crying, and and then they say the first time in Major League history, a father-son has won with the same organization and won 2 World Series apiece, and he went out there, and it was such a class act by the Cardinals. And boy, when I went out there, I think that there's probably about 47,000 people crying with me, because it was a special moment, and something I never forget. I have that picture. It's kind of a collage of all the pictures that the photographers took that day, and I have it. I see it every day when I go out to do lessons, and it's so amazing. But then, that's the year where I really started kind of getting into some dark, I started abusing drugs, cocaine, and alcohol. I had already started abusing alcohol after my injury, and then that led to eventually led into poor decision making, and then it was just like, once I made one bad decision, it kept spiraling until I didn't even know who I was anymore. And that's when I went to the Cardinals and said, man, and that was about it. And then you saw me in 2008, I wasn't fixed yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, you bring it up, and we can kind of go into that, but part of your story is it kind of slowly started when you were playing. It seemed like, from hearing your story in the past, very straight-laced, not involved in anything like that. And then all of a sudden, one thing happened, and you were still playing, still trying to put up with it. And at the end, you were still playing, but dealing with it in a major way. But it ended up still continuing to compound even post-career for a long time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So after I got hurt in Seattle, I would, like you said, I was a straight, I'm from a real small town. And when I tell my story, I say that, I thought people that had, depression or addiction or used or abused drugs and alcohol in any way were weak people. I thought that, anxiety was made up. And so, I was the guy that would go out and talk to the schools. From the time I was in high school, I'd go to grade schools and talk about, the DARE program, and talk about, drug and alcohol awareness, and staying, show me your friends, I'll show you your future, that kind of stuff. And, really try to set your goals and stay, put the blinders on, and don't let other people interfere with that, or drugs and alcohol. And I did that all the way through college and the minor leagues, and in the major leagues. I had a DARE card that was made about me and with me on it in Anaheim. I remember DARE days. I'd be kind of the spokesman and stuff, and so for me to end up getting into addiction just showed me that it can happen to anybody. And then the whole depression and anxiety, like all that stuff hit me. And it was just like it was unbelievable. I thought, man, I've overcome everything. How can I not overcome that? But yeah, so 2005 is when I started drinking a lot. Probably the most 2005, because now I wasn't playing.
Right.
And then 2006, I curbed it down a little bit. I still drank, but nothing too crazy. I did dabble with a little bit of cocaine towards the end of August of that year, but nothing too big. But still, like, I think, I think that might have led to me starting to get more addicted to it, where, it was kind of a off and on use thing, for a little bit. But I still, after the season, then it was I just went like, oh, let's celebrate now. And it blows my mind to think of my decisions back then. But, I think by that time, the alcohol was starting to make me, not be myself. And then, 2007, it became, it started becoming almost an everyday thing. And then, Hancock passed away. And then, I kind of used that as a crutch to, because I think that affected all of us quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then I started using that as, because when you're using alcohol, it can create depression, and, same with drugs, it can create anxiety and all this stuff and paranoia. And then you use more thinking that it's going to help you. And it just makes everything worse. And, I was so new to this stuff. I didn't know what was going on. So I kept I didn't really want to tell anybody because I was afraid I'd lose my job. And I was afraid, what people would think of me, and so I just kept trying to balance it all the time. One's an upper, one's a downer, and it became basically a hell on earth. And it was constant battling, and me trying to get sleep, and then me trying to get up, and then eventually I was hardly getting any sleep, and I was still playing at a pretty high level, which was I still don't know how that happened, but it was absolutely horrible. And then finally, after the All-Star break, I can't remember if it was July or somewhere around then, my teammates were noticing. I thought I was hiding it. They all knew.
Right. Not a whole lot you can hide in a locker room.
No. And people were, they'd kind of say things, hey man, what's going on? I remember Preston Wilson being like, man, I think you've got a problem, man. Like, you shouldn't be. Because I was like grabbing a vodka before the game just to try to settle myself down. And he's like, dude, like, you got some serious issues. And at the time I was like, man, come on, like, give me a break. And since then I've seen him and I've told him, man, like, that really hit me, like that you cared that much about me. Jimmy Edmonds, Troy Percival, they really tried helping me a bit. Walt Jocketty and Tony were on my side trying to help me. And, I ended up going to rehab that year. And it was at Center Point, I think, in St. Charles, I think. And it probably wasn't the best choice because it was outpatient and everybody knew who I was. So I wasn't going to, I tried to use an alias at first, and then like 2 days later, I went out to lunch with this kid, and he goes, everybody knows who you are, right? And I go, I figured so. And so I really didn't. You've got to open up when you're facing addiction, because you're trying to hide stuff, and part of it's getting all this junk out of you, and so I went, I held everything in, I came back. I thought as long as I didn't use drugs, I was fine. I kept drinking. I was in the lineup the first day. I think I got one for 3 off Zambrano, which was pretty good at the time.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, we're all good, but it wasn't gone. I didn't do the work that I needed to do. And during the off season, I ended up thinking I was better and everything was fine. And then I got into a wreck in California, talked to the Cardinals about it. With my agent, and went to rehab, and I was doing pretty good. I felt like, I could I could, I think that I could beat this thing, because I hadn't used that long. And then, there was arrest warrants that came out during spring training, and I had been telling the guys during stretch, man, hopefully, because of that wreck, they never did catch up to me because I ran from the scene. Luckily it was just me and a fence, but that's another thing. I could have killed people and like that, and so in the long haul, I'm very, very lucky. I could have died myself. Especially nowadays with this fentanyl, it's like playing Russian roulette. But anyway, the Cardinals, thought, and we've had a lot of distractions, and I think it was probably the best. At the time it hurt. I thought that I thought that they kind of gave up on me because, I thought, man, I went and I really did it this time and I really meant it. And, but overall, I don't think I was quite ready yet. And, just even if I came back, I think I would have ended up probably being a distraction again. And so I think for a team and an organization, it was the best decision. I hate that I even put him in that spot, to tell you the truth. But at that point, I really should have just said, hey, man, I got to go take care of myself and then come back. But instead, I tried to go with the Atlanta Braves, and within a few short weeks, I was doing well, and I already had a house in Atlanta, but within a few short weeks, I was off the rail again because I was upset, and I was upset that I wasn't with the Cardinals, so close to home and my kids. And so I used that as a crutch. And then, boy, like you said, it was a battle for a good, boys, that was 2008. I finally quit drinking in April 5th at like 5:30 at night, 2018. So 10 years after that, I went to another 10 rehabs and just kept battling. I knew that it wasn't easy. Some people can go to rehab once and be, get through it and never drink again or never use again. For me, I would get short periods of 9 months or 6 months or a year, but it was really hard for me to get past the first step in AA, which is saying that my life was becoming unmanageable and I'm powerless over alcohol because or drugs, because I never felt that I was powerless over anything. And so, as a baseball player, we've got to have extreme confidence. And I always thought I was different than everybody else. And that if you put an obstacle in front of me, I can do it on my own. I don't need anybody else. And so it took me a while to figure that out. And, me being a Christian, the biggest thing was me letting God take the wheel and steer. And I'd always prayed to him and saying, hey, God, help me out, get me out of this jam, or I promise I'll never do it again. Get me through this game. I'll never do it again. But I'd always, after I'd get through it, I'd say, okay, I got it now. You can let me have the wheel again. And then after a little bit, boom, I'd steer it right off the cliff. and I like to do, I guess I'm a four-wheeling guy. I don't know. I did a lot of off-roading, that's for sure. I like to call it a detour, but it was hell on earth for sure. And, but through God's grace and letting him drive, I'm here to still share my story and give other people hope that you can do it, because I felt like I was in the depths of despair and, I wasn't worth anything and nobody liked me and my kids are better off without me and just crazy stuff that, the devil will shoot at you to try to make you give up, and just prayer works for me and everybody around me praying. And finally, I came up with this thing. It's picking up sticks. I live in the country. There's a bunch of trees on my property, and to mow the grass, you got to pick up the fallen sticks, and it hadn't been mowed in a while. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go outside today and I'm going to start picking up sticks. And so I picked up a few, and then the next day I picked up, bunch more, and then I had a wheelbarrow full, and then I started trimming the trees, so you could get under them, and before you know it, I'm out there, and I'm like, all right, we're making some progress, we're making some forward steps, and then I just started getting more and more strength and surrounding myself with great people, and and my family started seeing the difference, and my kids started seeing the difference, and then really, it's a true miracle. I had gotten sick. I turned yellow with jaundice because of my liver. They thought I might have to have a transplant, and then all of a sudden, they gave me a 20% chance to live at one point, and before you know it, the doctors are saying you look great. You better thank the guy upstairs, because we haven't seen anybody turn around like that. And then, my kids and my dad's and my true friends relationships started getting closer and closer. And then I started getting involved in baseball and teaching kids, and really learned about what's the most significant thing in life, and that's investing in other people. And when I started doing that, that's when I really found the joy again, is investing in others, and I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad you brought your kids and your dad up, because that's one of those parts I think is so cool. I know it wasn't cool for a while, and probably not easy to talk about the relationship and where it was, but the fact of where it is now, I think that is a credit to how far you've come, and how those closest to you have truly seen that change and have come back into your life. If you don't mind speaking just a little bit about kind of where that was and where it is now, because I know you and your dad did a signing together a couple of years ago, and me as a father, having two kids, and me and my dad are really close. I talk to my dad almost every day. I know how important that, sitting where you are right now, how important that's got to be to have that back.
Oh, it's unreal. I thought that I'd lost everything. I thought, that I'd never get that back. I should just move to California and just get away from everything, and, or just isolate, and not talk to anybody. But I remember the specific thing that happened to me when I was with the Angels. And what I said to myself in this situation ended up kind of being my rally call to get better and to mend those relationships. And we were playing, it was the first game against the Yankees. Nobody on the Angels had ever been in the playoffs before. And we were in a hotel, and I think it was Grand Hyatt. And, of course, we're playing an all-star team. And late in the game, we're up, and the ball's hit to me. Jason Giambi hits the ball to me. And I go to try to get it at first base, and I'm trying to make a really good play. Usually I have it. It hit off my glove, kicked out in the right field. They gave it a hit, but I usually have it. And then Soriano hit a home run, and we ended up losing. Now we're down 1-0. I go back to the hotel. I had always put do not disturb on my phone in New York, because, they'll call you like crazy. And so I go back to my room. There's a message. I pick it up, and there's this New York fan like, "You stink, you blah, 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 you blew it," all this stuff. And it was like a 2-minute long message. And I sat on the bed like, oh man, like, he's right, man. We're down 1-0 to the Yankees. Like, this is a 5-game series. I blew it for us, And then I said, man, wait a second. We still got 4 more games, I still got a pen. And as long as I got a breath, I got a pen to write a great ending. And the next at bat, I was against Andy Pettit the next day, and I hit a home run. And we ended up beating them. And then we ended up sweeping them the next 3 games. And I went on to, have 19 RBIs, and which was the record until David Freese broke it, which is fine.
I'm glad he did. I'm so glad he did.
And I remember watching this Game 6 home run, and I said, "Oh, there it is. He tied it. He's going to break it tomorrow," and he did. And it was exciting. It was just as exciting to see that as it was to be involved in 2 World Series wins. But that whole thing with, as long as you got a breath, you still got a pen to write a great story, just kind of kept with me. And I'm like, I'm still alive. Thank God. Thank you, God. I'm still alive. help me get out of this, help me get out of it, and I use that with my relationships with my kids. And just the other day we had a minor leaguer come up, and I called my dad and I said, hey, his sister and his dad reached out and said that he's struggling with Adderall and alcohol, and he was released and he's really struggling, and so we sat down with him for a couple hours, maybe three hours, and I actually brought a friend over who just lost his son, who was a month. His son was a month younger than this kid, and he talked to him about it, and like from where we were, he was so upset with me that he never slammed the door on me. He just said, hey, when you're ready, come back. It was like the story of the prodigal son, like, we're here for you. You stop making bad decisions, we'll help you in any way we can. And and I felt like, well, like when I was using, I wasn't thinking right, and I'm like, well, wait a second, he should accept me for who I am, but he couldn't sit and watch his son waste away. And and the same thing with my kids. They like to be with me, but most of the time I was with them, I wasn't all there. I was, even if I was sober, I was still tired or hungover. And it was just an awful place for me to put him in. And then because of the alcohol, I got divorced. So then I wasn't with them a lot of the times, not even in the same town. Fortunately, when I was with the Cardinals, I was only, 4 hours away. So I could come and get them. We usually meet halfway, but still, I wasn't the same person. And so, my youngest daughter, she never even really knew her real dad until, 2018. And really the same with my middle son. And, like I was talking to my dad, and I told him a story. I said, I don't know if you remember this, but you came in and you and I was like, out of it. And you said, Scott, I know that God's got a great plan for you. And it chokes me up to think about it, but he's like, God's got a lot in store for you. Like, don't give up. Like he told me he's got big plans for you. You're gonna do some great things for people, and I just start bawling, and then to last April, so part of the thing I do is every year I get coins for my sober date. And I had the 4-year coins, and I give them to all my kids. And on the 3-year, my son came to my church men's group and gave it to me. And, there was a cake and everybody celebrated. And then last year, my parents, Tanya, who's been just an incredible person in my life, helped me to get sober. Tanya Boyer, she was a gift from God. She does this, and she gave the coin to my parents, because I always get one for myself and display it in the cage, so kids can see it and parents can see it, because I don't hide what my past at all or run from it, and they presented it to me, and it's just one of those moments that's just incredible. And just the other day, I told my son, I said, and I told him before, but I said, I am so sorry for not being there on time, or not being at your games. And and he goes, for a long time I thought it was like my fault, or I was doing something, or I was responsible for getting you better. And I said, that is not true at all. Like, you did nothing wrong. I'm blessed to have you in my life. And we got up and we're crying and hugging, and he's like, I'm so grateful that you're in my life. I'm so blessed. And I said, Cody, I'm so proud of you and the person you've become. And just special moments like that, are just incredible. And and then to work with people that are suffering. People will come to me and say, my son, I get probably a good 10 to 12 a week, where somebody will reach out and say, hey, will you call my my brother-in-law, or will you call my son, or will you, would you meet? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it, And, it's not everybody makes it the first time, but there are a lot of people that I've worked with that, through God has become sober and hopefully maintains a sobriety. And so, yeah, it's been incredible with the family. And of course I'm blessed with just an amazing family and kids. And now we're all on the same page, which is so awesome.
Yeah, that to me is the coolest part of the story of, imagine 7 years ago thinking that, that you'd be in the spot you are today, and to stay with it and stay persistent and to never give up is, I just think it's a story that everybody should hear. So fill people in now. Like, you've been crushing it the last 4 years. obviously it's a daily battle, right? It's something you can never, give up on or slip up on or kind of let your guard down. But what is I know you're doing some lessons and stuff, and you're kind of mentoring people, but where are you at today? Where do you think the next, 5 or 10 years, where do you see Scott Spiezio at?
That's a good question. Currently I don't really know exactly where I'll be in 5 to 10 years. That's something I've tried to give up to God and say, hey, where do you want me to be? It would be easy for me to, call the Cardinals or the Angels or somebody and say, hey, can you find me a spot? And, for a coach in the minor leagues, try to work my way up. But I don't think that's where he's calling me, at least not yet. I'm really lucky to be in the area I'm at. The Midwest there's great people. There's great people everywhere, but my hometown people and the Midwest people are just such great people. And, I really want to try to make an impact in this area, St. Louis area, my hometown. And so over the last, like you said, it is an everyday battle. Unfortunately for me, I prayed that God took away my cravings, and I've had no cravings since April 6th of 2018, not one, which is incredible. But I know serving others is part of how you and working with alcoholics and addicts is how you stay sober. And because you see what they're going through and you say, man, I never want to get back there,
Yeah.
And with my visualization for baseball, I visualized the times that, the wreck, the times where I got the call from St. Louis saying you're released. Seeing the looks on my kids' faces. For a long time, my one son called me Scott. He didn't even want to call me dad, because I wasn't a dad. He was more of an adult than me, at 10 years old. And so it is an everyday battle, and you don't want to put yourself in bad situations or have contacts that have, bad interests at their heart for you. And so I surround myself, I'm involved with my church a great deal. Tanya and I lead a life group every Monday night. We get together, and it's a great group of friends. And I'm involved with the men's ministry and things like that. And I try to speak at schools in my area about the effects of drug and alcohol, and also about, setting goals and work ethic and things like that. I have a few of those coming up. And then I started Spiezio Baseball, which I call it Home of Champions, because we got 4 World Series rings between me and my dad. And so I'm always poking fun at the Cubs fans. I'll say, in another 101 years, you guys can tie me and my dad. The same goes with the Sox. But so I have fun with that. I try to teach individual lessons with the parents present. And I talk about a lot of this stuff. I talk about what it takes to get there, but also, how this stuff can help you in other areas of your life. If you're not a baseball player, or, whatever you go into, a lot of these things can benefit you in life. And, so I just have a lot of fun, and I'm so blessed that people bring them in. I had a parent tell me probably about 4 months ago. He says, a few years ago, I wouldn't even let my kid near you. Like,
right.
There's no way I'd even step foot on your property. And he goes, And now he goes, will you talk to him about, drugs and alcohol? Cause he's going to be a freshman this year. And he goes, and also if he doesn't want to talk to me, can he just show up here and, if he's in trouble, or can he call you? I said, absolutely. So, the trust factor is so cool too, that, people are trusting me with talking to their kids about this, and they're open to it, because the people remember my story here, and they knew that I was straight as an arrow. And so they're like, man, if this can happen to him, this can happen to, me or my kids. And so that's why I think it's so urgent, especially with the fentanyl thing now, that we discourage kids from even trying it, or anybody. Same with, Adderall and Xanax and all these other pills. And, now they're counterfeit, and a lot of them have fentanyl in them. And it can you can do it one time and you're done. And so that's why it's such an urgent thing for me. And it's been really cool. And what's neat is, the Cardinals have called me back to do fantasy camps. The Angels, asked me to come out for instructional league last October. They want me to play in the Hall of Fame game in May. The Cardinals want me to come back in September and do a fantasy camp. And then the coolest thing of all, which I just can't even believe, is, and it chokes me up thinking about it too, how far God has taken me, to serve him, is that the Cardinals asked me to come down for Christian Day and share my story on June 10th. And, hopefully my kids will be able to be there. And of course, my parents and my sisters, and it'll just be such a magical moment to share what God's done in my life.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I think it's a testament to you prior to the issues you had, right? Everybody that knew you before knew the kind of person you were, what you're about, and the fact that you're back to that person now. Such a great story of redemption. And look, baseball players have a platform, right? You had a really big platform. I think you might have a bigger platform now, to really reach these kids. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate, as a father of a sixth grader girl who's in middle school, and we're having these discussions. I feel like every day it's rapid fire of something new that's coming up or changing, or that she's exposed to, and trying to get out ahead of those out of those situations and scenarios, and have those conversations. And somebody like you that's open, and that's what I respect the most about you, is the fact that it's, hey, I've been through this, but I'm okay talking about it, and want to use it for good for other people. And so I can't thank you enough for your time, for your honesty, for being open. And I love the fact that you're back involved with the Cardinals, and in ways here and there. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of you, as the more you get involved, the more people are going to want to be around you. And so thank you for stepping in the chatter's box and spending the time with us today. So again, my name is Kyle McClellan. I'm the host of the Chatter's Box. We have a whole list of episodes. If you have not listened, we had Whitey Herzog last month. You go back to last year, we have Albert Pujols for an hour and a half, Adam Wainwright, Yadier Molina, all kinds of people. You can listen to the Chatter's Box podcast on any podcast platform. You can also watch it on the Cardinals YouTube channel, and you can see all of them in person, or listen to them on any platform that you get your podcast. So, Spiez, thanks again, man. Thanks for being a part of this, and wish you the best of luck. And I know we're going to be in touch going forward.
Thank you so much. Thanks for letting me share my story. Love you, brother. Hope to see you soon.
Appreciate it, man. Love you too, man.